Hey everybody, I'm Doug Gribbins from Riverbed, and I'm here today to give you an overview of app internals all in about 15 minutes. To keep me in check, I'm going to start my little countdown timer here, and we'll check periodically just to make sure I'm keeping it within the 15 minutes. So let's go ahead and minimize this. So what is app internals? App internals does application performance monitoring by looking at your backend servers and taking managed code down to the class and method level. And we can actually go deeper than that, down to the parameter level if you decide. It does all of that by using bytecode instrumentation in your web-based applications running on either .NET or Java application servers. And it does that using approximately 1% CPU utilization on your servers. And because it's using bytecode instrumentation, that means you don't have to change a thing in your actual code. It's all done in memory, so App Internals is up and running in just a few minutes. And it looks at every web-based transaction in your enterprise. It doesn't just sample a few of your main transactions. It grabs them all and indexes them by more than 70 different criteria. And because of that, we have some really deep analytics baked into it that I'll show you here in just a few minutes. So if you're looking for a deep root cause analysis of your applications with just a few button clicks, you should really take a look at App Internals by Riverbed. Okay, I'm going to start at the top of the screen here. If I click right up here, you'll see all your instrumented applications in a list right here. TradeFast is our demo application, so in this case we're just going to look at TradeFast. But again, you'd have a list of all your applications, and I can look at a singular application, or I can look at the entire enterprise by clicking All Applications. And while we're at the top of the screen, let's talk about the time periods. I can come in, I can select the recent 15 minutes, recent hour, recent day, or a recent week. And what I can also do is I can dial up a comparison. So let's say you come in Monday, someone says, hey, I was out on the website last night, and that was probably about 9 o'clock last night. We might dial up 8:30 to 9:30 and see what was going on at that particular time period. And we can do a comparison, maybe compare it to a week ago at the same time and see if things are normally like that. So anyway, we have the ability to come in and really kind of dial in a particular time period. So starting at the application map, this application map is showing you the servers that the transactions have hit during this particular time period. And in fact, we give you a more detailed application map, if you will. You can see over here, we've got each of the servers, and some of our servers have multiple instances. Now, TradeFast is purely .NET, but we can also look at Java. And we can stitch these transactions together between .NET and Java as well. So even if we had a Java instance on a machine, we can still track the entire breadth of a transaction. You notice the little edit up here. I can show color by AppDex. AppDex is actually a user satisfaction score, if you will. I can also show exceptions as well as the current average CPU utilization on a box. So a very detailed application map. We can see the actual clients and their IP addresses, what have you. So a lot of information from the application map. Going back to the overview, we look at geography here. Geography we're getting from doing a JavaScript snippet. We can actually inject a JavaScript snippet into each of these web pages, or it can be put in there manually. We could load it via an F5. Once again, if I go to edit, I can get things like page load time by threshold, by gradient. In this case, we're looking at page load count with a gradient view. And if we mouse over, we can see things like page load times and page load counts in the different locations. Coming over to performance, again, we're compared to yesterday at the same time period. And if I mouse over, again, you can see that the server response time compared to yesterday. We'll see things like number of transactions, again, in this particular time period, page load times, page load counts. 24-hour overview, this is a way of manually changing the timeline. So again, we're looking at 11:25 to 12:25 on the day that I'm recording this. But I could grab this, I can move this bar manually. I can just grab one side of it, expand or collapse, if you will, that particular time period. If I come down to recent alerts, we have both transactional alerts as well as environmental alerts. Environmental alerts are like CPU is exceeding 95% or we're getting low on memory. Transactional alerts are the home page is taking longer than 5 seconds, or the orders page is taking longer than 7 seconds, or it's transactionally related compared to environmentally related. And by the way, AppInternals monitors metrics second by second. That's a very high granularity of monitoring. Many others will monitor perhaps a 60-second average or a 15-second average, but second by second can really point out some things that you might miss with other monitoring software. Down here we have the insights, and because we're looking second by second at what's going on the systems, we can point out things quite quickly. The AppInternals itself will look constantly for anomalies in the system. So you see things like 77% related to database delay on CT auth when we're looking at server response time. So these are just things that the system itself will kind of point out. And again, if we click on the little details link right here, what it does is it's going to take us up and do a comparison compared to the time period that it's noticing that the anomaly is occurring. Okay, coming back up, you notice top transaction types. And here we're seeing the home page, if you will, is showing some type of alert status. Again, mousing over, we get some information. Well, something that's critical in AppInternals is the ability to pivot. So I'm going to double click on the home page. And when I do that, I want you to notice the server delays right here. Currently, looking at TradeFast as a whole, we can see that application code is about 36%. Database is just a little averaging about 0.03 seconds per transaction. But if I pivot on some component, in this case the home page, you'll notice we set a filter, the home page is expanded, and now on the home page, application code is 68% of server delay. So this ability to pivot is really kind of key with AppInternals. I'm going to go ahead and remove the filter. And you'll notice we're right back to where we started. Okay, coming down, we've got top servers and top instances. I can click on edit. I can see things like server response time by server. We had exceptions up there before, CPU usage, number of transactions on each server for that time period again. Same type of thing with top instances, same type of information that we can get from that. Okay, so a little earlier I showed you the application map. Let's take a look at some of the tabs going across, some of the other screens in AppInternals. But first, tell you what let's do. Let's go ahead and check that timer. Oh gosh, we're about halfway through. So let's go ahead and continue on. So again, we saw the application map. Let's talk a little bit about the transaction types. As I mentioned earlier, transaction types are defined. There's a number of ways we can do that. We can do it by the title of the page. We can do it by the URL, what have you. In fact, we can use multiple types. So, for example, if you have logins, maybe the login page is login.aspx, but you have a couple different applications. So we could say, use the page title as well as the URL to define the transaction types. So here you can see the home page, portfolio, orders page, etc. You'll notice with all of these, we have a little magnifying glass. And by clicking on this, we can go down. And in this case, we can see all of the hits to the home page. And you'll notice that when we get to like the servers. Again, we have the little magnifying glass that allows us to go in and see all the transactions on that particular server. Same thing with instances. Same thing with geography. And while we're looking at geography, you'll note if, for example, I click on the United States, you notice under geography, let me scroll down a little bit, we change, and once again we're isolated on the United States and seeing where our transactions are coming from, again by page load time, page load count. Okay, so let's go back to the transaction types, and now we're going to actually take a look at the individual transactions. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the orders, and you can see in the time period all of the hits to the orders page. Now what we do is we float the longest response time to the top, but if I click this, we can actually get it by wall clock time. So you can see 12, 24, 59, and going later the further down we go. So if I grab one of these, let's go ahead and just grab one at random here. We're going to load that transaction into our page. You can see the actual page load time, the time the user experienced to get this page. And by the way, you'll notice that the user was someone named David Stein. In many cases, we can pull the actual user out of the page. Little deep in the weeds to say how that works, but in many cases, regardless if it's .NET or Java, we can pull the actual user out of the transaction. You'll also note, while we're looking at the architecture, we see the actual components that this transaction hit. So it hit the portal, it hit the connect box, the data access, and it hit the database on the back. But coming back up to the summary, we see that the total page load time was about 2.41 seconds. Of that, it spent 0.113 or 113 thousandths of a second on the servers, and obviously, the delta for that was in transmit to the actual browser. We didn't have any exceptions. This ended with a 200 status. The user was actually using Firefox 30 on a Linux box. There's the user's IP, and this was in Mexico. There was our page title, kind of a summary where the largest backend delay was, etc. Here's the page load delays, and we're getting this from that JavaScript. So we get things like time to first byte. We also get download and render time. We can also pick up things like DNS, the amount of time it takes to do the name resolution. If the page is doing any redirection, the connection setup time. We can even get an initial AJAX call. So for those pages that are constantly updating, we'll get the entire page load delays, and then we'll also look at the first call of AJAX, and then we call the page complete. So that is what makes up the page load delays, and obviously we're looking at the method delays over here. So this is, down to the class and method, the longest running methods. What I can do at this point is I can click on category, and here we'll see that 39% of the delay in this particular transaction was due to the database itself. Now I want you to notice the little bar up here, this little orange component. If I scroll down, you'll notice that kind of moves across the screen. So this just makes it easy to navigate, and in fact, because we see the database was a significant portion of delay in this particular thing, what I can do is hit the SQL statement, and it slides us right down, and we can see that we had two SQL statements in this transaction. Both of them ran one time, and a couple other things I'll mention about this. You'll notice this top select statement here ran 44 thousandths of a second, only ran one time. The lower one, the select top 15 CO order ID, that ran in less than 10 thousandths of a second. Two things. We'll actually pick up stored procedures as well, and we can also expose the SQL bind variables. We turn that off by default because we don't want people walking away with the credit card numbers and the expiration dates, but you can turn that on if that would be beneficial. While we're down here, let me go ahead and show you environmental performance. If you notice the little blue area here, this is when the transaction was running on this particular instance, and we're showing you some of the key operating stats like CPU, garbage collection time, while that transaction was on that particular instance. Okay, with that, let's check our time real quick. Ooh, less than 2 minutes to go. All right, so let's quickly minimize that. You'll also note that we can show you all the top calls. We can show you the call tree, etc. All right, just a couple other things I want to show you real quick. If I come back up to the top, I mentioned all those 70 different criteria, and you can see all the different the 70 different criteria that we index each of these transactions by. And of course, I can search by any of these or multiples of these. And finally, I want to show you the analysis operator. Here, for example, we have like summary reports, navigator, etc. So if I click on histogram, and let me just clear this out. Okay, I'll hit search, and here's our histogram. You can see that we show like transaction counts versus response time versus wall clock time, average response time versus wall clock time, top values for server, top values for instance. And one thing I'd like to quickly point out is you'll notice these is the portfolio page. These reports are dynamic. So if you're a developer, maybe you're working on the orders page, I can click on the orders page here, everything changes, and we have the views that we want. So a lot of information with these analysis operators.